think you're even more detailed in planning than I am.
It depends on, like, honestly, it really depends on the project. Because, like...
Yeah, every project is different.
Yeah, like, this one in particular, because it's a 15-year-old one that I'm revamping.
The mediums have changed, like, twice?
No.
Just the one time? Okay.
The mediums changed from doing comic into novel form, or a light novel. But it's so different. So, where before, I could leave a lot of details blank for the artist, and, like, we would talk about style, tone, and things like that, and then they could build the world visually. And so it wasn't always necessary in the script form of the story, where, of course, as a novel, since I'm the one building it for the reader, then I really have to go back and be more precise about things. And just, like, the world building itself needed a lot more work. And, yeah, I mean, a lot of the stories, like, I'd sit down and write a lot, and then in the editing, when I, like, totally revamp and actually plan, and then the second draft is a lot more detailed.
See, I do outline after outline after outline, and each outline is where I do more of the adding or deleting a scene. Once I do my first draft, it's rough. It's a lot of telling. So that's where I'm spell checking, I'm changing my grammar, I'm trying to get the motions in there in a showing instead of telling. And sometimes I'll add scenes, but I don't think I ever delete scenes in my editing process or move them.
Me. I've done that so much. That's like one of the biggest things
I've actually interwoven scenes where they were like two different scenes,
merged
together. But they weren't merged together. They and this was for our comics, so it worked better than in a novel necessarily would.
But when
where
overlap.
I wrote one scene and then I wrote the other scene, and then I added them to overlap. So it the transition back and forth. One person on one scene would make a comment, and then this character in another scene talking to a different character, their ongoing conversation, sometimes it felt like a punchline to what that was kind of something that was really fun. And because, again, collaboration with an artist, she knew what I was going for, and so her laying out of the pages and the pacing and the transitions and stuff, that was something that visually we could do. It's something I would like to do in novel form, but I don't know that it would end up right.
I mean, even in script form, you can do that with movie scripts.
Right.
And that's something I've done before with movie scripts. And it's so frustrating sometimes when I'm breaking up certain scenes, that are supposed to be simultaneous from the comic form into novel. And it's like, okay, so which one goes where? And since they're not supporting one another the same way that they would in a comic form, how do I elevate each scene to stand up and do its best on its own and not lose any of the feel that I want? Because obviously it's gonna be different. Sometimes there's certain ones that it's like I just drop the B plot altogether, because it's just like of that scene. It's like it doesn't work anymore when they're not together and bouncing back and forth. So there's been a few that I just had to cut out one. I know, it hits you right in the feels.
I have a hard time editing as far as deleting things. A lot of times it's expanding, it's realizing I didn't explain something clearly enough, or I was doing an exposition drop instead of really showing it, and so trying to rework.
And sometimes exposition drops are easier when you're in comic form. if you're in a novel form, because you have both the narrator's voice you can use, the character's thought bubbles, their speech bubbles. You got all these other tools.
You can turn it into a visual gag.
Exactly, and then visually, so you have all these layers to use to get this information across.
Two particular pages that come to my mind. One was 2 guys are having a conversation in their apartment, and the guy is basically telling a story explaining why he can't pay his rent, and the other guy here's these 2 exposition bubbles, and he's leaning on them, and it's like, ugh, he's so frustrated because he knows he's stuck with he has to pay both shares of the rent, and it became a visual gag, but you got the emotions of both characters in like one square,
one
panel. That's what I was trying to think of, and it was one of my favorites. And then the other one was where it was between 2 female characters talking, and one of the characters is notorious for being able to talk really fast and just drop a lot of information all at once, and so it was an ongoing joke, and making it work visually different times, but one in particular, it was like she's just talking and there's this huge speech bubble, and the girl she's talking to is leaning away, trying to not get crushed by this speech bubble. And so exposition in a comic form can be way more fun.
Yeah, you can play with it visually.
Yeah, you can make it into a joke, into something that plays off of the other characters, like the person who's taking in this information, how they're being overwhelmed, how it's the information itself is affecting them, and so you have the emotions of that character as well. And in a novel form, that's something that I really
it's so much harder to do.
I gotta figure that out and get better at it, and that's an excuse to read more novels, right?
Well, not in November because you gotta get your words out.
Yeah, when I'm meditating.